Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent. It's a big day here at PAC 14. One of my favorite people in the world is in the house, Amanda Pollack from the Center for Watershed Protection. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Now, you were the longtime city engineer, which had a different title because they changed all those titles. But in my world, the baby boomer world, we called it the city engineer for the city of Salisbury. And you did tremendous work. We all miss you terribly. Tell us what you're doing now.
Sure. So I was with Salisbury for almost 10 years and decided to move on. I'm working for an environmental nonprofit, and I'm doing primarily stormwater engineering as well as some sewer and water work. So we do anything that has to do with clean watersheds and healthy ecosystems.
So just trying to make sure that things, when they run off, don't pollute somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a big task. We actually serve nationwide. So we have projects all over the country, and this is a topic that's not going to go away, and it's not an easy solution. So we have a lot of work to do.
So one of your big projects, you're working for the county. You
Yes.
got a project for the county with our sewer and development. Now, people say, oh gosh, we're going to sit here for a whole half hour and talk about sewer. But we are, because sewer is so vitally important to our economy. Everything, growth and development, all depend on sewer. Our environment is all based on sewer. So there's a lot of important stuff related to sewer. And the county's trying to undertake a huge project that will change things immensely with sewer.
Yeah, so I can talk for more than half an hour on sewer, as you know very well. So, I'll just start and you stop me whenever. So I guess a little bit of background. Wicomico County hired George Miles and Buer a few years ago to do a water and sewer master plan.
They are the great engineers of the community.
They are. And I worked there, full disclosure, I worked there for 16 years before I went to Salisbury. So GMB's Water and Sewer Master Plan was adopted by the county in 2022, and it looked at all of the septic systems in Wicomico County and what to do with them. And there's approximately 18,000 or so septic systems. And that master plan said, let's look at serving anything that's near a municipality through the municipality instead of creating a new wastewater plant. So that would be about 10,000 septic systems, so more than half of what's out there could be served by an adjacent municipality. There's a lot of issues with that we'll get into, but that was the strategy. Then another 5,000 could be served with new rural wastewater treatment plants. And that was the recommendation, that the county start to look at creating new treatment plants in strategic locations to serve rural areas. Then that leaves about 3,000 septic systems that wouldn't be served, that would just remain septic systems. And of course, those areas could only grow and develop if they could be on septic systems. So GMB prepared that plan, presented it to the prior county administration and council, and then there needs to be steps to implement it. So the way I got involved initially was that Greater Salisbury Committee, Mike Dunn, developed a task force, and the chair was Matt Drew. And that task force was
another engineer, Matt Drew.
Another engineer, yes, he is also an engineer. Didn't do as much in the sewer world, but more mechanical engineering. But so they pulled together interested people from throughout the community with various backgrounds. So I think there were other engineers on there. I was going to say Matt and I were the only engineers, but that's not true. But a lot of business leaders, the Chamber of Commerce, members from the county council. And really to talk about how do we start to implement this plan. It's huge. It's hundreds of pages. It's a detailed engineering study. And there were goals and recommendations for implementation, but you really have to start taking it in small chunks. So that's where I was a member of the task force. And we helped to write a white paper, kind of boil it down and simplify the topic. And we were doing this last year during the election season. So not knowing who the county executive would be, but we wanted to be able to say, we're here to help you implement this, and help you throughout the process. You're not alone.
Right.
So, and then when Julie Giordano was elected, she's met with the task force a number of times. The task force also met with municipalities in the county just to say, here's what we're doing and here's our strategy. So initially, the task force really wanted to be able to come up with an urban project win and a rural project win, and kind of set some pilots for how can we do this, because this is huge. Wicomico County doesn't have a sewer system. So you can't just overnight say, great, all right, let's just create a sewer system. There are a lot of steps. There are a lot of things to consider. There's financial structures. There's just the customer base, everything. So we tried to help lay out some just steps and take it into really, really small pieces and things that can move along at the same time. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen concurrently that will still get us to that same end goal.
And it's not just growth and development, there's a public safety and health issue here, as well as an environmental issue. So there's all these different, there are people who are anti-development who just say, well, we don't want sewer because it will just grow more. But we're hitting a crisis in terms of septic problems in the community.
Yes, and really, so this project is not really based on growth. This is based on the environmental and health issues of failing septic systems. And there are a lot of people in the county now that have mound systems or pump and haul agreements or just failed systems and nowhere to put a new system on their property. So that's what was really driving this. And we had Colin Zimmerman from Coastal Association of Realtors was on the task force. And he told a lot of stories about people that would call and say, I can't sell my house because my septic system's not testing properly. So it's really stories like that started to build the momentum for this group and kind of really gave us that motivation to, okay, this time this study is going to get implemented.
Right now, one area that's headed for crisis, and we keep hearing about all this all the time, is the Old Ocean City Road corridor headed east out of Salisbury. Some of those neighborhoods that are off that road. Those houses are all built in the late 40s, early 50s. The septic systems are 65 years old now. They need to be replaced. There's not enough land to do it. So they're probably some of the first candidates to be hooked up to a municipal system.
Yeah, potentially. So they would be targeted to tie into the city of Salisbury. And Salisbury's wastewater plant is in great shape, as I know very well.
It's part of the creators and mentors of that plant.
However, Salisbury has policies, and their code at this time requires annexation if you want to get water and sewer service. There are no more urban service districts, which were a thing in the past. So part of that is a discussion with the city of Salisbury and what will you allow and what will you consider if there are areas that have health concerns. And the code, Salisbury's code does allow for that, for them to provide water and sewer service if there's a public health need. And that need has to be identified and disclosed by the public health officer. So the health department plays a very key role in that. But yes, that's an area with relatively small lot sizes, so there's not that much room to put a replacement septic system. You've got private wells, so you always for sure have to maintain separation from your well and your septic system. So that would be an area we're looking at targeting. And honestly, around Salisbury, you've probably seen Salisbury city limits. They're not, it's not a nice line. It's jagged all over the place. So there are a lot of areas, donut holes sort of areas in the city that have city services surrounding them that would be nice natural places to be a perfect pilot project because the infrastructure is already surrounding the area.
Now, one of the complaints readers call me, they say, yeah, I want municipal sewer, but I don't want to be annexed into Salisbury. The county should just build a plant, and I'll just, I'll hook into that. But it's not that easy.
It's not that easy. It's not. So one of the biggest challenges is where do you put a new wastewater plant? You have to buy the property, and of course nobody's going to want that right next to their house. And then where do you dispose of the effluent coming out of the plant? Because all the towns in the county here, their wastewater plants discharge into rivers and ultimately go to the Chesapeake Bay. And so the state of Maryland's trying to have more control over that. They don't like to have new discharges. So that will be a discussion that we'll have with the state when Wicomico County starts to potentially build new treatment plants. But it's not just so easy as saying, okay, I'm going to build a plant and I'm going to discharge it right here and that's that. It's a very long process. And really before then, Wicomico County needs to have that structure in place to have a sanitary district. So without a sanitary district commission and the framework to be able to own and operate those facilities, you can't even get started until you have that structure in place. So that was kind of our first big step was through the state legislature last year to pass a bill to allow Wicomico County to create a sanitary district. So that did get completed last year and that passed. So that was a huge hurdle and they needed to do that for sort of step one. Wicomico County does have an urban service commission. So technically by their charter, they could have debt and start to build sanitary facilities, But really, this should be a separate structure. We need to create this sanitary district and sanitary commission that will oversee this in the future, and then hire the staff and
Right.
operators.
And people say to me, what's the sewer sanitary commission going to do? But
Mm-hmm.
growing up in Ocean City, I saw once they created one of those and you had someone in charge of it who had a vision for where sewer
Mm-hmm.
should go and how it could help. It became sort of its own entity and made
Mm-hmm.
great decisions. And that's how they were able to hook up West Ocean City. So there's
Right. Mm-hmm.
been growth and development there, which was another health issue.
Yes.
They also had the money from Ocean City to help.
Mm-hmm.
But once you had that impetus there, it really did work well.
It does, and I've said this numerous times to the colleagues at Wicomico. Each of the counties around us have sanitary districts, and they all operate slightly differently. Somerset's a different model than Dorchester, than Worcester, than even Sussex County. So we have plenty of models to look at around us and decide what fits Wicomico the best. Because some of the things might make some sense. Like Dorchester's sanitary district doesn't have any wastewater plants. They tie into Cambridge. Now, Wicomico intends to ultimately have some wastewater plants, so they can't just go straight with that. So they really need to look at what makes sense for them. And again, with Wicomico, we want to start small. We want to start with projects that can be implemented and get get their feet wet, just get started without saying, okay, year one, we're building 10 new treatment plants and here's how it's going. I mean, that just wouldn't be realistic. We've got to take on manageable pieces.
Now, funding is crucial.
Yes.
So am I wrong to say the state is not going to provide funding if the county wanted to build a sewer plant in, say, Parsonsburg, when the Salisbury plant is accessible, from that area? So they've already invested money in the Salisbury plant. They're probably not going to invest money in a new plant when you can go to Salisbury.
So lots of things I want to say to that.
Yeah.
So first off, Parsonsburg is actually hopefully going to go to Pittsville.
Okay.
They're a stone's throw
Go
away.
the other way.
Go the other way.
Okay.
Pittsville had been planning for some time with their capacity to hopefully be able to take on Parsonsburg. But the state's going to look at it based on a number of criteria. And what's key in Maryland is priority funding areas, or PFAs. So those properties need to be in a priority funding area for the state to consider paying for anything. And then once you are, they'll look at a preliminary engineering report that says what is the most cost-effective way to serve them. So for Parsonsburg, you would do a report that shows, okay, if we have a standalone treatment plant, here's what it would cost. If we tie into Pittsville, here's what it would cost. If we decide to pump the other way and go to Salisbury, here are the costs and the pros and cons and the alternatives. So there's a whole checklist of things that needs to happen for the state to consider funding. And really, that's one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle. There are a lot of planning elements that have to line up before you can even apply for funding. It needs to be in the county's comprehensive water and sewer plan, which is different than the master plan that was just done. And the priority funding areas, making sure it's in smart growth areas and proving the need. So a really big part of the first steps is just proving where are there failing septics, or where are there areas that will potentially fail based on groundwater levels, the soil conditions, other failing septics in the area. So we've been working with the new health officer at the health department, as well as the planning and zoning department, to create mapping and to have GIS maps that shows the soils, the groundwater levels, the pump and haul agreements, failing septics and that type of thing.
Yeah, now there are a bunch of existing plants in the county. So let me just do the list real quick. So you got Willards, Pittsville, Salisbury, Fruitland, Hebron, Mardella doesn't?
Nope.
Sharptown.
Sharptown does.
Sharptown does. And is that it?
Delmar.
Delmar.
Yes, so
Delmar.
there are 8 incorporated municipalities, 7 wastewater plants that are municipally run. So Mardella is the only incorporated municipality that does not have a wastewater
Okay.
plant.
So Salisbury has a rule, if you're going to use our sewer plant, you got to be in the city because of the urban services agreement, which is so complicated. I won't go into that. That's a vestige of the political environment in the 1960s. It's a whole nother thing. Could never happen today, but it was just a political maneuver. But anyway, that's my opinion. But so do the other places like Hebron, if there's some communities around Hebron that need sewer and they wanted to hook into the Hebron plant, would they have any annexation rules about that?
I think it's different for every municipality. And take, for example, Fruitland, and there was the drinking water issues in the Morris Mill area a few years ago. Fruitland served them with municipal water, but those areas didn't have to annex. So in a lot of places, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis.
And there was a health crisis there,
and
too.
there was absolutely
So they
a
couldn't
health
wait
crisis.
for annexation
Yes.
process.
Yeah. But I don't think they've required annexation since then either, but so I don't know all the codes as well as I know
Right.
Salisbury's to know whether or not they have the health provisions or if they require annexation, but it's a conversation we'll have with the municipalities when the time is right. When the Greater Salisbury Committee Task Force brought the municipalities in, frankly, a lot of the comments were, we are at capacity or we have other issues, and that was not their focus on expanding. It was really maintaining and operating their system right now.
Right. Now, I've heard that about Pittsfield, that they're at capacity. So to take Parsonsburg would be a problem, but they kind of maybe want Parsonsburg because then they can get money to expand.
So Pittsville's in the formal process of expansion. So the first step is that preliminary engineering report. So they're having that done, and then they'll apply to the state to go ahead and go through the expansion and upgrade process. So Pittsville has been, in my opinion, very forward thinking. So when we brought them in and they said, oh yeah, we've been looking at Parsonsburg, they know it helps them to expand their customer base. And so that, those are conversations that the county hopes to stay involved in, and hopefully that'll align with Wicomico County's goals also in the area. But yeah, so Pittsville's going through the process. So I don't think they could take on new customers, that large of an area today. But they're in that process to upgrade their plant so that they can eventually.
One of the communities I hear about all the time is Whitehaven. Whitehaven needs a sewer plant, and I'm always like, to the readers, there's 30 houses there maybe. Yes, all of them have sediments going into the Wicomico River from them. All those systems are failing just because of the ground level, water level in the ground. Is it really worth spending $10, $12, $20 million for a sewer plant for 30 houses in Whitehaven, and who's going to pay for it?
Yeah. It's going to be a challenge. When you have less customers, it makes it so much harder to make it affordable, because there is a certain level of operation and care that needs to happen to a wastewater plant, whether it's 50 customers or 30,000 customers or 100,000 customers. So it doesn't make it that much easier to operate just because it's a small plant. You still have all the same regulations. So frankly, through the Greater Salisbury Committee Task Force, that's part of why Whitehaven wasn't our first recommendation for a rural project, is because it is so small, it'll have its own challenges. So it will really need to be looked at, and frankly, we'll probably still need to look at other alternatives. And I know pumping miles and miles and miles seems to be, that wouldn't make any sense, but you'd still have to look at, is there a treatment plant that they could tie into, and you just create a large pumping station and get the sewage elsewhere and treat it. So I don't have an answer yet for Whitehaven,
right,
or many of them for that matter. We're still kind of in those early stages and looking at what does make sense, what really makes sense, the most cost effective, because hopefully we'll be able to get a fair amount of grants in addition to some loans to build the projects. But then there's that ongoing operation and maintenance cost forever, which ultimately will be passed on to the people in those service districts. So you don't want the Whitehaven sewer bill to be 4 times the average in the county. You want it to be a reasonable level that's affordable. So we're really going to have to dive in and look at that more. And I will say, in the master plan that was done last year, it identified that as an area that could potentially have a treatment plant. But that master plan was at a very high level. The next step is to really take that down to the more detailed levels for each area. And GMB is actually helping the county right now, working on that, looking at kind of the next step in the Mardella Springs area.
Okay, so we hear a lot about package plants. My understanding, there's only one package plant in the county.
Yeah. So, and I'll just tell you, it's a pet peeve of mine. I don't like the term package plant.
Right.
Have I told you that before?
No, you haven't. But I've never heard you say package plant.
No.
So.
Because every wastewater plant is unique. A package plant is referring to essentially a plant that you would buy from a manufacturer. The implication of saying package plant is you're thinking that means it's turnkey. It's plug and play. Here's this box we've put in, and I don't feel like that's actually realistic anywhere, because there are situations that'll be unique for wherever you are, and especially on the effluent side, where you're going with the effluent and the solids and the liquid portions each have different means that have to be disposed of afterwards. So, but a package plant is essentially referring to, it's not custom. So you're not starting from scratch and customizing it. You're using a manufacturer plant. But Anyway.
So in
people
Village
say
on
that's
River,
fine.
they needed sewer.
Yes.
County couldn't provide it, so they're like, we'll just build our own. The developer
Yes.
said, I'll build my own. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, and so as far as I know, I don't know much about how that plant's operating, but I believe that it's owned and operated, I think, by the homeowners association
Right.
that's hired a contract operator to run that. So yeah, that's the only private wastewater plant that I know of in the county.
And there's some county oversight. The county council does sign off on some stuff that goes on down there.
Yes, and I believe maybe through their urban service district hats is how they have oversight with that. I'm not that well
Gotcha.
versed in that piece.
So my question is, why wouldn't more of those be the solution?
And those could potentially be the solution. When there are going to be private plants, or not private, new wastewater plants out in the county that the county owns, they could look at any type of system like that through a manufacturer. You always get into procurement regulations where, especially a county putting a treatment plant out to bid, they usually can't sole source a vendor like that and say, we want this specific package plant or nothing else. So they would probably have to set some parameters on what type of plant they want. There's all sorts of different treatment technologies, and you would select your treatment technology based on what your disposal requirements are. So again, that type of thing could very well happen, but I think my biggest problem with it is it's not as easy as you buy a package plant, it arrives on a trailer one day, you set it down, and you start processing wastewater the next day. There's just a lot more that goes into it than that.
I know you're an engineer, so the communication aspects is not really what you're supposed to be about, even though you're really good at that. And I'm smarting right now because I've written no less than 30 stories in the last 10 years that Unity Square was coming to downtown Salisbury. And the day that they start beginning construction, everyone's like, what the heck's going on? No one told us. And I'm like, so it's up to me to try to communicate to the public, educate the public. And, already we're hearing this stuff. What we went through when they tried to put water to the airport.
Right.
The misunderstanding, the misinformation, the suspicion, conspiracy theories that were out there. And people who don't want to be annexed by the city just can't get it through their head that if they want to solve this problem, that's what's going to happen, I think.
Yeah.
So how can I communicate that to people? What strategies do the municipalities need, either the city or the state or somebody, the county, to let people know that this is the solution and you're going to have to live with it?
Well, so two things come to mind, and I'm really glad you asked this because I did want to talk about public outreach. But first, with Salisbury's engaged in conversations with Wicomico County. Maybe annexation wouldn't be required if there's a health issue, so more to come on that. So I don't want to panic anyone to think that they have to get annexed if they're going to get sewer. If there is a health emergency, just like with Morris Mill, maybe there's another way without annexation. So that aside, on the public outreach front, we haven't started that at all. We know that there will be a significant public outreach component, and we really do need to start talking to residents about their needs and their concerns. I think we wanted to get a little bit further ahead on trying to understand, get our brains wrapped around some solutions first, because right now it is still just at a very high level. So we would have a hard time going to a public meeting and saying, you're going to get sewer on this date and here's what your bill's going to be. I couldn't even guess right now, what a target monthly bill or quarterly bill for sewer would be right now, or if it would be sewer and water, or just sewer, just water, or what the situation would be. So there's a lot that could be gained from talking to residents now, but it would really just be helping to identify the problem. So I think we'll really start a public outreach campaign once we start to target some of the solutions a little bit better. And so looking at even the Pittsville, Parsonsburg, we haven't had any public meetings in those regards yet because Pittsville is doing their process, and at this point, Wicomico County is just an interested party. Would like to see how that goes, and hopefully Wicomico can have a role. Same with Mardella Springs. We've talked to some of the town officials, but haven't started to have public meetings until we can kind of wrap our brains around what we think maybe some of the solutions could be for Mardella. But yes, there will be a significant public outreach component. I guess the best thing right now to tell your viewers is it's not going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
No one should be afraid that all of a sudden they're about to get a bill or construction's going to happen in front of their house. They will know. And again, where we're targeting smaller areas, we can't do the whole county in 5 years or 10 years or anything like that. So it will be smaller projects. So those communities when they're identified as potential pilots, we'll have meetings with them and really start to have that process and that discussion.
Yeah, the kind of feedback I get is people who live down like around Beaver Run School who say, yeah, this thing, they're keeping it secret, and they're going to shove it down our throats, and we're all going to have to pay all this money. But my septic's just fine. Well, your neighbor has a mound system.
Right.
Can't you see there's a problem? Well, I don't need it. Mine's just fine. And it just makes me crazy that there's not the vision that there needs to be, that this is going to be a big problem.
I know, and it's hard for residents. And actually, my first house when I was first married was near Beaver Run Elementary, so I know the septic issues in that area very well. And it's hard until you're having a problem.
Right.
It's not your problem.
Right.
And then once you have a problem, it's, oh my gosh, this is an emergency. Or, hey, I just paid $20,000 for a mound system. I don't want this sewer. So I know people kind of fall in those three different categories, and I understand that. And again, hopefully that's where, if we can prove the need, we really can help to get as much grant funding as possible, so that on the capital cost end, there's not as much debt service, and really they're just paying for operation and maintenance. But it's the right long-term solution. If your neighbor has a mound system, chances are you're on a ticking time bomb.
How do you feel about the Unity Square stuff? I know that was a vision of yours. You implemented so much of the downtown improvements.
Well, so first off, it wasn't my vision. I was there as a Salisbury employee to help carry out the vision and the approved reports. So Unity Square, yeah, it's exciting to see it break ground.
But you saw the merits in it.
Oh, I did.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's my point.
Yeah, I did. The costs are a little scary for sure, but it's a nice gathering place. And with the old plaza, I still call it the plaza, with West Main Street no longer being a plaza, this really does allow for space for them to hold events and to have community gathering. And it should be a place where people can say, hey, meet me for lunch down at Unity Square. I'm still calling it Town Square, at Unity Square. And it should be a place that kids can go, and right next to the library you can get a book and go outside and read. So
to me it was always going to be like the crowning feature of all the great downtown work that you did.
Yeah, it kind of is. It ties everything together. It's right next to the bright, colorful parking garage, and it ties in with Main Street and the beautiful brick sidewalks and the new lighting. So yeah, it should be very nice.
So people who are suddenly annoyed by this, do they just need to calm down, or?
This year is tough with the budget woes, so
Yeah.
I think that's been a lot of it is just the price tag in a tight budget year. So hopefully they'll be pleasantly surprised when they see it. I know certainly Main Street, we had our share of criticism while it was under construction, but people are pretty happy with how that
Once
looks
it was
now.
done, everyone was like, oh, we get it now.
Yeah, looks great.
So Amanda, how can people get a hold of you if they have questions?
Well, I'm still live in the area, involved, I'm really happy to be involved in this Wicomico County project. And my email address for work is ahp@cwp.org, so Center for Watershed Protection, and you'll still see me around at all the events.
And the county element's just a part of what you're doing,
Yes.
but there's so many other things that you're doing to help businesses and developments through the environment.
Yeah, so I'm actually, one of the projects that I really enjoy is I'm a technical assistance circuit rider for jurisdictions in the Choptank watershed, so including Easton and Denton and Caroline County. So I get to take all my experience from consulting and from the city of Salisbury and help other small towns, so I really enjoy that a lot.
She's Amanda Pollack. She's one of our favorites. She does incredible work for our community. We're so glad she had time to be with us here today. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you so much.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent Newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and 1-on-1. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.